What's up, everyone? Glad to have you back here. We took a week off for summer vacation last week, but we are back here for Demand Gen Live. I'm looking forward to being with you. Before we get into the agenda, had we have a live event coming up on Thursday, right? Thursday.
Yes. EGL keynote.
Yeah, I'm doing a keynote on at noon on, I think, marketing innovation. And so if you're interested in joining that, we'll drop a link in the show notes. Secondly, I just love these little like tidbits of knowledge and information that I can share with you. This one very ironic. So this morning, I got a LinkedIn DM from a vendor saying, "Hey, Chris, just wanted to thank you so much because we just closed a really important customer, and we learned that they heard about us from your podcast." And I was like, but the funny thing that you didn't know about is that the person that said that to me was actually a multi-touch attribution vendor, and their software couldn't measure it. They had to ask someone in order to figure it out. And so there are some really interesting like nuances here. Attribution vendors are now starting to understand all of the things that we're talking about here and the things that can't be tracked and how much impact that they can have, which then leads them to certain tactics. The interesting thing for people to think about is that happens at every company all the time. You just don't see it. You just don't see it because you're not looking for it, because you're not measuring it. But word of mouth, podcasts, third-party content channels are driving a lot of business for you that you don't see. So moving into the promised agenda here, I was reading the agenda beforehand, and I saw this topic, which is the MQA the new MQL? And when I was reading it, I was like, are people going to think that I'm going to talk about how the MQA is replacing the MQL, or are people going to think that I'm talking about in the future the MQA is going to be perceived as just as bad as the MQL? I think that a lot of people were going after the former. I think that my position is going to be closer to the latter, but let's get into it. Let's get into it and see what happens. And so I've been talking about, I could probably find videos or LinkedIn posts dating back as early as May 2019 publicly, where I said companies should stop measuring MQLs, but I've been talking about this non-publicly on the internet for 2 or 3 years before that, after realizing how poorly the conversion rates on these leads were happening. And so obviously I'm not pro MQL. I think and most people listening to this podcast would get that. But let's talk through whether the MQA is any better, because what people are going to be like is they're going to be like, look, Chris, I get it. The MQL wasn't very good, but over here we have the MQA that has 7 more data points and it adds in intent. And so therefore, when the score is better, we'll be able to go outbound and get better results. That's what people are going to say. I'll break down the two. On an MQL side, you just get one person and you get fit and engagement. And on the MQA side, presumably you get more than one person, and it combines presumably fit, engagement, and intent. And so the things that are different, more than one person, the addition of third-party intent are the two things that are here. But what's really happening? What's really happening is that if you strip out all of the jargon and the technology and the data, we have the same exact thing, which is marketers spinning around on a wheel trying to hit vanity metrics so their sales team can try and do sales to people that don't want to buy. That's pretty much what it is, with a little bit more data around it. And so what I want people to think about here is, where do you think this is going? Do you think that in 5 years buyers are going to be more happy for you to cold call them once they see intent data? We're like, companies are moving in a direction completely misaligned with how buyers are moving. And so when you move from an MQL to an MQA model, which is essentially doing nothing more than just changing the MQL score that deploys outbound, everything else is almost exactly the same. Maybe you have a little bit better targeting on your fit and there's some general improvements, but the overall motion is essentially the same. And what I'm telling you is that we have product-led companies emerging like crazy over the past five years for the reason that buyers can do a lot on their own. And so what I'm saying is that companies are now building infrastructure and building processes and building all of these things for a future that probably won't be here in 2 to 3 to 5 years, because they're going to need to do something different to accommodate how buyers want to buy. And so my recommendation, my solve on this for always, like, companies should be using intent data to trigger outbound, but MQAs is not an important marketing metric. It's not a primary marketing metric that I'm going to use. I'm going to look at how much revenue is being generated relative to the targets, relative to the costs that we're spending, and relative to outbound. And that's what matters. If MQAs go up in the process, which I'm sure they will if we do good marketing, that's awesome. But the MQAs going up are an outcome of good marketing, not the purpose of why we're doing things. And I'll pause there and see if people have questions.
I've been prompting some questions, but I think that was very well said. I don't even know if I have a clarifying one.
Cool.
I have a random question. So I'm a very new marketer, and right now, the company that I work for right now, we're primarily focused on SQL and MQL. Can you define what MQA is for me, so at least that way I can learn more about it? I'm just very curious.
100%. We're gonna get we got some topics later that'll talk about MQLs and SQLs for you.
Thank you.
On MQA, so MQL stands for Marketing Qualified Lead. MQA stands for Marketing Qualified Account. And so what people are doing here is that instead of looking at just one person's data, they're trying to combine several people at an account to create one MQA. And instead of you might have first party data that says, okay, like, this exact person was on your website, you can go after them. But that's the core difference, is trying to look at it at the account level given the shift to ABM. Good question.
Love it. Let's roll into the next one, and then we can get to some questions.
Cool. Yeah, I can probably knock through all 3 of these and then we'll just go to full questions. I think that'll be, unless there's like a massive uproar of questions, but we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
So topic number 2 is a big shift in B2B search dynamics. This one I think is really interesting for people to think about. It's more so, somebody asked me recently, what are some things that you see changing? And it's the best way that I've found to explain, I think, some of the reasons why I've intuitively deprioritized SEO, or just SEO is one way, but I would say search as a channel have deprioritized it probably since 2017, 18. And here's the phenomena that I'd like people to think about is that in 2013, because people didn't have access to LinkedIn, Peak Community, Revenue Collective, Reddit, Twitter with access to B2B professionals that also do their job, Facebook groups, contact information and a direct network with their cell phone of peers, because they didn't have all of those things. when they were going to make a high intent search, like something like the alternative to X company, with the intent of that search being I use X company and I want an alternative, or best vendor for blah, or top 3 options for this. Whatever any of those high intent searches where they're looking for Google to give them answers about it. My belief that today, and you can think about yourself as a buyer, when you make that search, you actually do it somewhere other than Google. When I'm going to figure that out, I'll message 3 people in a LinkedIn DM and ask them. A lot of people will do it in Revenue Collective, looking for an alternative, blah, blah, blah platform. I'm using X and I want to switch. Or in Peak Community, or in a text message, or posting. I saw someone do it today, looking for a WordPress developer. Saw someone do it on a LinkedIn post organically. Anyway, all of those places where people now make searches because they trust their peers, they trust the people that they're asking in a community or in social or in a DM a lot more than the result that they get in Google. And so I want people to think about, I think my belief is that the reason why companies continue to see less and less results on paid search, 1, because it's more expensive, 2, because they really poorly target in terms of keywords and therefore get lower ROI, but 3rd, because that search is happening somewhere else for a portion of buyers, and I think it will continue to move that way. So that's something that I got in the dynamics of search. And I say
with you in the chat, everyone's having similar experiences.
Yeah, it would just be I'll read it afterwards, but it's really interesting to think about that for the listeners afterwards too. Like, I haven't made a high intent search looking for something that isn't $3 a month or $7 a month or something like that. If it's a considered purchase, I know people that use all the tools. Like, I can figure out someone that uses them, get their opinion on it, ask them a couple questions to know whether or not it's for me, and then buy it. And so I like the people that are invested in trying to write blogs to get in that, in the affiliate link that shows you the top 5 things that are clearly pay to play relationship garbage, not good advice. Like, buyers know. Buyers know that those are affiliate links, that they either paid to get their link there or they get money if you click on it. And so I just believe that buyers trust their peers more than the stuff they're getting out of Google.
Just to expand on this a little more, like, what is table stakes though? Because people shouldn't completely ignore SEO or paid search. There's like a basic level that probably makes sense, but people certainly over index on it at the expense of other channels that will drive better results. But is there, like, what is the right play on those channels in your mind?
It's hard to say. Right now, we don't use them at all, and we're doing pretty well, right? And so I think it's hard to say overall. Generally, at a software company, you're going to want to cover on paid search, high intent, non-branded, branded, test competitors, but you'll most likely kill those searches because they're going to have negative ROI. And then in organic, I would almost mirror the exact same thing, and a bunch of people are going to write top of funnel blogs, whether or not I recommend it. So that's what people will probably do on the organic side. And so that's, I think, general table stakes about what you'd want to cover in search. I'm not saying not to do it, right? Like, I feel like I've gotten better at clarifying the message here. It's not saying don't do it. It's saying if you think that this is your primary channel, recognize that buyers are moving in a different direction right now. You think because the search volumes are going up or your web traffic's going up that it's a good thing. What's happening is people use Google for transactional information. They go there to get transactional information. When they're actually considering a purchase, they're going to ask their peers, which is why you get so much web traffic on your top of funnel blogs and no conversions out of it.
Carl is bringing up YouTube SEO and how there is some interesting opportunity through that channel. What do you say about that?
YouTube SEO would be a great way to bypass a lot of the stuff in Google. YouTube and Google obviously are owned by Google, and Google prioritizes YouTube video in certain searches, which can be advantageous. You can basically leapfrog everyone else. Also, just YouTube generally is a pretty decent search engine, and so both of those are viable options. The same exact dynamics exist in those channels, though, is that people will typically optimize for high search volume, low intent keywords. And that's just something that you should consider.
Definitely.
All right.
Are you about to break down what happened?
Yeah, this one. This
crushed their pipeline.
Yeah, well, this one might be a long one. So strap yourself in, people. We'll see.
Prepare yourself for Chris Walker rant.
This one, I got back from Mexico. I was out with some people for some drinks, some co-founders of a startup, and was talking with them. I do some advising on marketing strategy and stuff, and the conversation ended up in this place, which is our marketing team exceeded our pipeline target by 161% last quarter, and our sales team missed quota by more than 50%. And this is not uncommon. This is not uncommon. And so I want to talk through what I did. The first question that I asked is, so what do you do? What are you doing in marketing? I already knew the answer. Because when this happens, when marketing hits a leading metric and sales misses their quota by that much, there's only one thing that's going on. The only thing that's going on is that marketing is optimizing for a leading metric. It's either MQLs, SQLs, poorly defined pipeline, or something else that doesn't actually translate to the lagging metric of revenue. And so the next question that I asked, which is the right question, is, okay, so tell me how you define pipeline. I'm trying to, if you can notice, I'm going to talk through this conversation and try and help you understand how I dig in here. Okay, so tell me how you define pipeline. And pipeline is op created when an SDR books a meeting. So that's how they're considering pipeline. Sales reps never talk to this person, haven't been on a meeting with anybody. How are we going to consider that pipeline? It's sad how many companies do consider that pipeline, actually. And so at digging a little bit deeper, the reason that this happens is because there is a gap between what most people consider pipeline, like what I just defined there, and what your account executive would consider pipeline and is going to win at a reasonable rate to close won deals. And that gap is large, and all of the marketing garbage moves to close lost in the middle of that. And so marketing hits their target, all of it moves to close lost, sales has to leave with the scraps and misses their target by more than 50%, all because of a poor definition of pipeline that allows things like performance marketing to overinflate pipeline and not help the sales team hit their goals. It's the exact same thing as an MQL, right? Like MQL, marketing goes 161% to plan, sales misses quota by 50%. MQL, just poorly defined lead doesn't actually lead you to the metric that you want. Same thing with pipeline, which is why I've always recommended to people, and I'll continue to recommend, the way that you solve for this is that you set marketing's leading metric at a place where you know you're going to win 20% of those deals or more. The reason that companies don't make that change is because marketing wouldn't hit the goal. because getting to that number, to a place where if you hit that number, sales is going to hit 100% of quota, getting to that number is really hard and would require you to fundamentally break what you're doing in marketing right now and rebuild something new that works better, and companies won't do it. And so what you get is you just get this, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to run this some type of lead gen model where we're going to take low intent leads that don't want to buy and have our sales team chase them around and set some metric for that process that shows us that marketing's hitting our goals, and then not acknowledge that it's not acknowledge that that is the core reason why sales is not hitting their goal. And so the recommendation back to the company that I talked to is if you redefine pipeline to the way that we qualify pipeline to what we call it here, then marketing probably would have missed quota by more than 50% along with your sales team, and that would have been the right thing to do. Because what you need to try and get to in this metric is that when sales misses, marketing misses too. And you don't see that very often because marketing sets metrics that they know that they can control easily. And it's a big jump, and it takes a lot of confidence and a lot of understanding as a marketer to move to a place where you're accountable to metrics that really matter to your sales team. And
John makes a comment here about how a lot of this can be a result of people creating their goals within their own team without talking to each other. And it was echoing a similar thought that I was having in my head. It's like the reality is the whole go-to-market function is really one big team, but they continue to goal set and operate as separate teams. And in addition to everything that you said, just shifting your mindset to like having some type of shared goal across all of those teams, marketing, sales, and I would even say customer success, can go a long way in driving that alignment.
Totally. You're still going to have this broken down in some way of what marketing needs to deliver. And I would imagine that this was not set in a vacuum. I don't think that marketing goes over here and be like, this is where our metrics going to be without understanding what sales is going to be. What happens is that sales says we're going to need this much pipeline because we're going to win. We need 3x, 5x pipeline coverage. So whatever we need to hit to our quota, multiply that by somewhere between 3 and 5x. That's what I need from you, marketing. And then marketing's going to go out and deliver that with a poorly defined pipeline number, which is very easy to do in the way that the pipeline was defined in this example. Pretty much just generate leads and let SDRs book meetings and set massive targets on the amount of revenue the deal's worth. And then what happens is the pipeline doesn't convert at somewhere between 30 and 20%. So they need way more pipeline coverage, and sales misses by a lot because the model was built on a napkin and is severely flawed. But most companies will do this as a team. They'll, like, when they go and put marketing's MQL number together, like, that's usually driven through a team. It's just that the model that they put it in is flawed. They project out numbers that don't make sense based on a best case or almost holistic scenario. And when you just drive bad leads into the funnel, all of the conversion rates are worse, and you see significantly worse performance. It's something that I would imagine that a lot of people that are on this call or listen to this podcast afterwards have seen before. I know that I've seen it several times in my career as an employee of a B2B company as well. Where it's just that the goals that get set for marketing, whether it's marketing doing it or sales doing it or whoever, are flawed because they don't actually help sales get to the goal. All right. We cruised through all that stuff, people.
I know that was great. Should we get into some AMA? Danny has a good question that I think will create a really nice back and forth based on the context that he's in. So I'm going to kick us off with him, and then we'll get into the Q&A. Danny, you're live. I just unmuted you.
Awesome. Thank you again, Megan. Hey, Chris. So I'm a brand new marketer. I recently was the SDR and recently stepped into a demand generation specialist role. My VP of marketing gives me a lot of freedom right now, but at the same time, I don't really have a leader for me to really understand the role on how I can be a great marketer. So just want to kind of hear your thoughts, because right now I'm just all over the place. I'm working with marketing operations, my field marketing manager, and just really trying to understand more on the top of the funnel side and what I can do to really just make sure that there's leads for the AEs and SDRs. But still fairly new to my role. I'll take 3 weeks into this role, but just looking forward to learning from all you guys.
Awesome. Well, you're doing an awesome job, Danny, showing up here and learning. So kudos to you. You're gonna be farther ahead than a lot of people in a short order. So looking forward to that. I think you got you have 2 streams that you want to take care of. Actually, neither of them really have to do with leads. And so I think the first stream that you want to go down is you want to try and understand like demand marketing and revenue operations fundamentals. And so like understand you've been an SDR before, so you probably understand what the SDR lead process looks like and what a sales process looks like, right? So you want to have a good understanding of that. You want to have an understanding about the processes that happen with marketing, how things get measured, basically just like foundational knowledge around that. You're going to get that on this call. You could probably go back through our podcast and get a ton of good information as well, just learning through that stuff. The second thing that I encourage you to do that most demand marketers never do is, especially given where you are right now, I think it would work quite well, is to see if you can get in front of five customers and 5 people that don't use your product. I actually think that it would be more beneficial for you for the 5 people that don't use the product, just to understand what they're like and what they're working on and how that's prioritized, and building a customer research, like customer understanding muscle as a demand marketer is going to be one of the most powerful things in your career, because most people overlook it. They just don't do the fundamentals well. And so like what I laid out to you is 2 very fundamental things that you can do now at a tactical level in order to deliver leads. Is that what you're working on?
Yeah, so right now we have a leaky funnel, and I'm working closely with our sales operation along with SDR manager. We're almost done fixing the leaky funnel, and now we're just trying to have better understanding on because I guess the company is looking for a 25% growth rate from my understanding, and now I'm just trying to figure out what is the best way for me to really just help the team out. And there's so much information for me to absorb every day, so I'm learning whatever I can.
Yeah, this is a big one. I think another thing that you could do is you could work and understand what the conversion rates are to sales from all of your different lead sources, and then try and put together a basic Excel model. If you wanted to grow by 25%, what are the things that you would need to do in order to get there, informed by the conversion rates historically, because a lot of the things that you'll be doing in order to grow by 25% are most likely things that have really poor conversion rates. And so just by understanding those, you make sure that you don't get into the situation that I talked about last time, where marketing's hitting their goals and sales isn't, because the planning was a little bit inaccurate. But going through the process of trying to build a general like model, I think would be a good thing to look at too.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Good to see you. Hope to see you back.
Great question. All right. Drop your questions in the chat, guys, and I'll bring you on after. But we've got a couple really good questions that were submitted in advance. So I'm going to break down a couple for you, Chris. So this is anonymous. We started running a playbook like yours, as in Refine Labs this year. We've ungated our content. We're focusing on creating educational, informative content. We're pushing that out. Unfortunately, the execs at my company are struggling to understand why Facebook and LinkedIn aren't driving more demos for us. The majority of our demo requests are direct and organic search, and they keep asking why we don't have visibility into what led to those coming in. Because of this, they want to start pulling back spend from Facebook and LinkedIn because they aren't driving more attributable demos, but I know that it's working for us. What do you suggest?
So we'll take this in a couple of different directions. If it comes to it, because I've had this happen before, just shut the stuff off for a month and watch the numbers go down. People will get it. Like I've learned over time that sometimes people need to scrape their knees and see metrics move in the wrong direction to actually believe it for themselves. And so if that's what's needed to happen, then that's one option, and it will happen. You shut that system off. If you say that it's working, you shut that system off for 30 days, you will most likely see a pretty significant drop off. Most of the conversions that we would normally see within Facebook and LinkedIn convert within a 7-day window. So over a 30-day period, you will see those go down. Another thing is to just explain it to them. Like, this does not feel ultra complicated to me. It's like people are seeing stuff on their phone on LinkedIn, and then they're going and asking for demos in a different place. And so it's always confused me why companies need attribution to this. Like, I'll give you an example. We worked at, I was doing work. This is early on in Refine Labs journey. I was doing work for a customer, and over a 5-month period of time, their sales qualified opportunities went from like 12 a month to 40 a month, that came through the website. And in order to go from 12 to 40 SQOs, their demos had to go from like 30 to 90. And that was over a 4 or 5 month period of time. And literally the only thing that we did, conversion rate optimization on the website, stop wasting $70,000 a month on broad match Google ads, start pumping money through Facebook ads targeted, Facebook and Instagram ads targeted at the people that they're going after. And magically all of these metrics started moving up. And that company was wondering what was going on as well. When you go through this process to try and prove things that shouldn't try to be proven, you're going to end up doing the wrong things to try and fit the measurement into a box that it doesn't belong in. The last option that you could have is that you could just put a how did you hear about us on the website, on the form, and you'll get Facebook, you'll get Instagram, you'll get heard about you from a peer, and all three of those options are viable. How did you hear about us is super easy. Just explaining to them how people actually buy things in complex B2B could be beneficial. And if it comes to it, shut it off for a month and watch the numbers go down, and maybe they'll believe it next time.
You mentioned this before too, even calling any closed won ops with the direct or organic source and collecting like some historical data to also prove a point while you collect some when you implement how did you hear about us.
Yeah.
So many of those
it's such a funny concept. I've done this before as a marketer, which is and this is why I recommend that if you work for a company that doesn't get marketing, to go find someone that does. Because what you're going to do is you're going to stop doing marketing and you're going to spend all your time proving things that shouldn't need to be proven. Like we're over here, SQOs went up 300% in the past 6 months, and we're going to stop doing all of this marketing so that we can go and prove something that makes no sense, that doesn't need to be proven. That's the problem that I run into here, and it's driven because people have been trained by vendors and through processes to fit measurement into a certain box, and when it doesn't fit into a box, they don't know what to do. And the problem is not Facebook's measurement, is that they need to get out of their own fucking box and see what's going on in the world.
Mic drop. We got some good questions that are going to keep this topic going, I think, in a really fun way. I'm going to bring Omar on next. Happy you're here, Omar. It's always really good to see you. Get into some dark funnel questions. And then I'm going to bring Brian. I'm going to bring you on next with your multi-touch attribution question. So this is going to be fun. You're live, Omar.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
What's up?
Awesome. Thank you, Meg. Chris, I was feeling down last week, and I realized, you know what it was? Because I didn't see Demand Gen live. That's what it was. We're
here for you, Omar.
Man, 1 week, it felt like a year. Yeah, and what a great segue, because you were mentioning about something not fitting into a box. So just for context for everybody, head of growth, Series A company. We're a SaaS company that sells to private medical practices. So we're selling to physicians, okay? So Chris, at the company I'm at, I've been there for a little over 6 months. And, we're like any company, we're doing a lot of different things. While we are exploring the traditional lead gen channels, just because it's one of those things like you have to do it, you have to,
try and collect it.
You have to try it.
Collect the data. You most likely get to the same result every time, but I agree. You should try
it. Exactly. And unfortunately, sometimes where I can't win with argument, I just say, well, I'm just going to have to let fucking reality prove it out. But we also launched a podcast webinar series, right? Really great educational. Both of those really got up and running, I'd say around March or April. So to date, we've done close to 10 webinars, I believe, 11 different podcasts, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing that I'm getting pinned on, which is a reasonable question, is like, well, how do we measure the success of these things, right? And so the underlying thing under that is like, well, what revenue is coming out of this? What kind of, SQLs are coming out of this, leads, etc., which I think is okay, right? My thing is, I feel that there has to be this happy medium where there are metrics that we can report on to frame how we can look at success with these things, but then also say that we have to give this shit time. Like, you can't have like a hit podcast that's like getting people to sign up for demos in fucking like 3 or 4 or 5 months. Doesn't matter how many, like some of these things, I hate saying it because it sounds like an excuse, but it's like, you need to give it time.
It didn't even happen for our podcast, and I think that we're one of the best at executing one. 3-4 months wasn't happening. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I guess, I just wanted to, it's a question, but I just want to hear you riff on it.
Yeah, I get it. Are you hitting your goals right now?
No.
What's your performance to your goals?
So last quarter, the performance to the goal revenue wise, we're a little, I'd say 60%. Right now in this quarter, we hit 60% like a few weeks ago. So we're actually doing better. The thing is, every month and quarter, incrementally, it's gotten better. But this is why, like, being a marketer in a Series A or B company is fucking hard, because you can have 2-3x growth.
I've been there before.
This shit.
I've been there before. Now tell me, is the 60% is the reason that you didn't hit it because the goal was unrealistic, or because you didn't hit it?
I think it was partly, I think the goal was a little unrealistic. It was a little bit aggressive.
Okay.
And we're learning. But, again, the questions that I'm being asked are very reasonable, which is like, hey, we need to have like predictable channels, which I agree. But shit, there are seasons in the year. Things happen, right?
But nobody would ask you these questions if you were 105% to plan. I'm positive.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
And so the time when quote unquote dark funnel or brand marketing, or however you want to look at it, the time where those channels get scrutinized in these companies is when you're at 50 to 75% to plan, and we don't have a lot of attributable channels, so people are going to attack channels that take effort and don't have clear measurement. This has happened to me before as a marketer. It's so obvious. And so the things that you need to be looking to do is like how to keep the podcast moving and try and close the gap on your goals. Another thing that I would think about doing, like head of growth, is do you have a split for how much should be sourced inbound versus through sales? Is it 100% inbound?
Yeah. And right now we're trying to get better about our outbound, but again, at the moment we have one head of sales, and so he's got a lot on his plate, and so I'm trying to support him as best as I can. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of like when you have limited resources to work with, limited time, limited all these things. Like there's, and I hate talking like this because it sounds like an excuse, but while we and I'm just kind of talking out loud, like the podcast, we're not going to get a deal out of the podcast. We've seen MQLs and demos come through from not our podcast, but from other podcasts where we appeared on, which was great. Thank you for that qualitative measure about adding that. How did you hear about us? The qualitative is super helpful because I just fucking slap that shit everywhere.
Yep. Really, the easy, just for people listening to the podcast, it's literally for anyone that has any questions on measurement for channels that are hard to measure. It is the easiest solve if any of those channels are working to literally just put this field on your form. So now, knowing that we're 100% inbound, Omar. Can
you clarify that question? When you say 100% inbound, as in that's expectation, or?
Yeah, is that the expectation that like you were 60% to plan, which means that marketing was 60% to plan?
Yeah, it's like sales and marketing. We share the same goal. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're running like lead gen on Facebook, and we're trying different things. But again, all these channels take time. But I'm just wondering, how can I better frame things like the podcast, like the webinar, where it's like, we have some hard metrics where we want to measure success, but just because we don't get a deal out of, let's say, the podcast, doesn't mean like, we remove it. There's many ways to look and use it.
Yeah, you should. This argument should be one. It shouldn't be I call it an argument, but it's not. Your position on this should be data-driven, financial, and logical, and that's what I'm helping you get to. And so, the reason that I imagine that you're doing things like a podcast, events, things like that, I imagine one, because you believe in the strategy, but also two, because they require high effort, low dollars. Because I imagine that your budget isn't very high. And so what you should work backwards to is you should try and work back to some type of CAC figure, and then a cost per sales qualified opportunity, and then match that against the budget, because in most of these companies, the financial model that gets built has no bearing to what's going on in reality of how much it should cost you to get a qualified opportunity. And there literally just might be a mismatch. And then all you need to do is add $5,000 a month, pump that into LinkedIn, and you go from 60% to 85%. And this whole conversation goes away because people just didn't know how much money you needed. I don't know if that's the answer, but that's the solve for this it's justifying the podcast. You've been on plenty of Demand Gen Lives. Like, we've gone through this thing. Like, you can try and talk people through how to do it, send them screenshots, put the self-reported attribution. You can do all of these things, but the real answer is just hit your goals so people don't ask you.
That's fair.
Cool. Got a follow-up?
No, I agree. But the question is, like, when in the time in between when we're trying to hit those goals, like, it's just been tough. I'm just trying to figure out like the easiest. Yeah. And I know we're all trying to figure this out.
I've led a 4-person marketing team at a Series A company and was in almost the exact same position. The podcast got cut after 4 episodes because we didn't have enough leads.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I've successfully, gotten people to think, like, more specifically, my CEO, that what's more important is like where are the revenue sources,
Yep.
right? Not number of leads. And
Yep.
he supports me on that. I think the biggest thing is, and this is why you asked about why do the podcast and webinar and these things. My thing is that, especially in a commodity driven business like we're in, billing and reimbursement, there's this wide open playing field where you can not only capture attention, but generate trust, authority, all these different things, where everybody else is playing in the same sandbox, which is like, who's going to have like some bullshit copywritten Google ad or offer or something on Facebook, right? It's all the same thing. And so my thing is like, how do you differentiate and force people to actually make a choice versus, comparisons? But the problem that I'm finding is that sometimes that takes time, and, yeah.
Totally.
Well, and just to reinforce what Chris said, Omar, like tactically, take a look at what you're doing on Facebook and LinkedIn. Like if you can pay for the attention before you build it organically to hit short-term goals, and you can build a business case to get more budget to do that while you keep, fighting the good fight with your podcast. You need to play both the short term and the long term at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's the solve. Just figure.
You got this. You got this.
Figure that out. Figure out whether it's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and add a little bit of money. Do some product marketing. I'm sure while the percentage from 60 to 100 feels big, I'm actually sure that I'm guessing, but I think that the actual number is actually not that high. So you could get through that in, I think, a relatively low budget. Follow-up. Yeah.
One tiny follow-up, just because it's been on my mind, where I think this is a gap and we need to solve this now, because again, I'm not like marketing a robot where it's very intuitive what it does. Can you just speak, just touch real quick when you mentioned product marketing, what that means in your mind?
Yeah. So,
as it relates to demand gen.
Yeah, because there's a whole skew of product marketing that I'm just going to talk about for the listeners, so they know that I'm competent. Like, I know that product marketing, I consider it basically strategy, understanding customers, figuring out how the product's going to fit in, positioning it, messaging it, sales, collateral, rollout, launch, all that stuff. That's what product marketing is. I've done product marketing a lot in my career. Relative to demand gen, what people need to think about is, how do you get everyone in the market to know everything about your product, which very few companies do. Most companies just try and shove people into demos so their salesperson can tell them about the 5 features that are most important, versus marketing, building creative, and distributing that on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or anywhere else to tell the entire market about that feature in a way that's way more cost effective and gets consumed in a completely different way and drives word of mouth in the market when everyone sees it on the same day. And that's what I think, that's what I'm talking about in product marketing. Super simple. Most companies I just have found don't do it. The reason is because they need the lead to run those ads. Right. So if most companies wouldn't ever do that because they wouldn't get leads out of it. And so the people would look, oh, you spent $5,000, no leads. This campaign sucks. Let's throw it out. But when they think, if you look at it a different way, you're paying like probably total $1,000 somewhere, probably more than that, $1,000 to $2,500 for someone to sit on a 30-minute meeting for your sales rep to tell one person about it. And you could pay a cent for the impression on Facebook, and it's just like, people don't see the differences here. I could tell 250,000. I could tell people that, like, way cheaper. Let me just put it that way without doing the math in my head. I could tell people across the entire market about everything about our product for way cheaper than what we're doing right now, as opposed to sales. And so that was a tangent, not necessarily super relevant to you, but on the product marketing side, that's what I would do.
No, totally. And just one last thing. Sorry to take up so much time. No, it totally isn't something that it came up on one of the dimensions a few weeks ago. And right now we're trying to shift some focus on that and develop those assets on the product marketing side. Is, people, even myself, like when you're ready to talk to sales, like you'll talk to sales, right? And so my thing is we need to add more things, not just on our website, but also online, where people actually know how the product looks, how it works and everything, the pricing, all these things. Because we're not on chat on Sunday at like midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had something come in on Sunday at midnight where someone's like, hey, like how does this work and what's your pricing? It's like nobody's going to answer that. So I think your point is very valid, which is to actually show people everything that's being shown in demo needs to be shown for free in multiple ways and in small tidbits online, because that's what people have available. And if they want to see it, they do.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, like it's just limited to this one time of sales. I think that's a really good reminder and a good point. Chris, thanks so much. And Megan, I appreciate it.
Totally. This isn't for you, Omar. This is for the listeners afterwards, but
why the hell isn't it for me?
It can be for you too. It's perfect. Yeah. It can be for you too. When people think about, okay, so when they go through the thought process that you just went through of like, okay, now people need to know things about our product, they work backwards. So they're like, okay, instead of having a form for a demo, now what we're going to do is we're going to put a 3-minute video on the demo form. And then everyone's going to be able to see. What people don't understand is that very few people actually ever land on that form. Like marketers need to be out in places that people are marketing to them in those places about the product. That's what people don't do. They think that the whole market's coming to their website to see their product. It's not happening. You need to go to where the people are.
Love it.
Nice.
The DGL community is delivering on great questions tonight. Love that back and forth, Omar. Always love to have you on the show. Brian, I'm going to bring you on. You have a multi-touch attribution question, and then Chris Glansman, you're next. We're going to get into multi-touch attribution and then unrealistic goal setting. Brian, welcome to Demand Gen Live.
Thanks, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, definitely. What's up, Brian? First time here? Welcome, man. Great to have you here. Where are you from?
I live in Austin, Texas.
Nice. We should be coming to Austin pretty soon.
Nice. I've been listening to podcasts, and so I had to jump on here and check it out. But Chris, you were talking earlier about I think it was an anonymous question. Somebody was dealing with something where they had Facebook and LinkedIn ads, and the executives weren't seeing the leads, and so they're trying to cut budget. There's a question right before Omar, and my comment was about what about this multi-touch attribution software? Mm-hmm. I've never actually used it. I was actually listening to a really old Demand Gen podcast, and we're talking about Visible. I think Gitana was talking about it, like episode.
that was a long time ago.
A long time ago. That's where I started, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just curious. I've never used it. I saw a really cool video on it and was just wondering, is that multi-touch attribution software, does it work? And would it be able to kind of help solve that problem?
So the short answer is that there are tons of limitations of what these tools can track that would prevent things like the situation that I was talking about would not get measured by multi-touch attribution software due to issues with cross-device tracking and the idea that there's no identifying conversion that's happening on the mobile device that 99% of Facebook ads get delivered on. So there's gaps. It's not to say that multi-touch attribution software isn't important. I think that we use it, most of our customers use it. It gives good insights, but I'm not in there. Like we have it installed on all of our customers. I'm not in there looking at every deal like, oh, like what happened. Like people nerd out about that stuff, not recognizing how inaccurate and incomplete the data that's being driven by those tools are, because those tools and the technology surrounding them was built in the late 2000s, early 2010s in a world where people had a linear buying journey on a desktop computer. And that's just not how the world works anymore. We're in a mobile device world. We're in a social platform world. We're in third-party communities. We're in direct text messages. We're in DMs on LinkedIn. All of those things create what is known as the dark funnel. In the dark funnel, none of that stuff gets measured because all the places where that stuff is happening have privacy policies that restrict people from giving that data, and they have no incentive to do it. LinkedIn would never give the data to our CRM of all of the people that view my video. It'd be a complete violation of their privacy policy. Same thing with communities, same thing with paid social that's non-conversion based. Third-party events may happen, may not. PR channels wouldn't do it. And so if you look, you have all of these places that multi-touch attribution software isn't measuring properly. And all of those places are things that companies don't execute on. And big enterprise companies, because they're obsessed with their attribution model, will miss all of the biggest opportunities because they're stuck following tech vendors and doing whatever tech vendors say instead of using common sense. The common sense is very obvious that people spend 2-3 hours a day on social networks that make B2B buying decisions. That's where they spend a majority of their time on a mobile device. So why wouldn't you want to put content there so that when they're there for 2 or 3 hours, they see it? And the reason that they don't invest the money to create content that people like, they don't prioritize those channels, is because it doesn't show up in attribution software in the way that they've expected, which is a huge opportunity for the people that do want to move on it. It was interesting. This is sort of off topic, but I think it's interesting. I was doing a talk with a growth equity firm this afternoon, and I was talking back to I was trying to set the tone of like I view marketing as offense. And the way that I was looking at it is in 2017, I was basically doing this marketing model for a company, and I thought they should have been investing 3x more in marketing. They were probably spending $3 million on a 40 million ARR business. I thought they should have been spending $9 million based on the performance, and they should have reduced something on the sales side by 20% headcount in order to grow the business faster, because we were doing 40% of net new revenue through marketing on 10% of the budget. And so I was trying to get them to move on this, and they didn't. They ended up taking the additional funds, continuing to expand the sales team from 40 and then try and move it to 80 people instead. And the thing that I thought to myself was, damn, something really bad is going to need to happen to this company in order for them to want to change. And for most companies, nothing really bad is going to happen that's going to force the change. You're just going to have mediocre performance that consistently declines over and over while somebody else in your competitive set does something way better. And so I'm encouraging people to look at what the opportunities are, because most people will not move on for the reasons that I just listed. They will not move to make a significant change unless they feel significant pain. And the only way that they're going to feel significant pain is when it's way too late. And so, which just allows somebody's got to do it. Like we're out there creating really big opportunities, and there's opportunities for a lot of people out there.
Great question, Brian.
Yeah, great question. I'm trying to round it out just so you got it. Multi-touch attribution software, use it. Understand deeply the limitations on it. I mentioned at the beginning, like multi-touch attribution vendors message me about the things that are happening in the dark funnel that their software can't measure. Good to see you, man.
That. Continuing the thread, we've touched on this a couple of times, even the agenda point on marketing and sales goals, but Chris Glansman loved your question around goal setting. I'll give you the floor. You're on Demand Gen Live.
Hey, Megan. Hey, Chris. Nice seeing y'all again. Your point, Megan, there's been a lot of good conversation about goals, whether they be unrealistic, misaligned, or both so far tonight. I'm curious how you get in front of that and maybe your approach to goal setting so that you reduce the chances of that being a problem.
Totally. So whether like Refine Labs is going to work with a new customer, or you're just a marketer and you're getting ready for next year's plans, or you're a marketing leader and you're going to interview for somewhere, the situation's always exactly the same, which is that I would have a historical performance over the last 12 months of what the business did by broken out by lead source, and I would understand the nuances of lead sources and how they set up attribution so I know that it's accurate. And then I would compare it against what they're planning to do in the future, and then also set cost efficiencies on both sides. And so, if you put that together, what you'll typically find is that goals go way up and the budget to support it doesn't go up as much, and the ramp happens in unrealistic time periods. Like those are the places where it breaks. Like, oh, we're gonna add 4 marketing headcount right here, and then we're gonna see revenue happen the same month. Like these are Series A financial planning mistakes that happen all the time. So those are some of the ways that I try and get ahead of it. And then I basically look and I'm like, okay, so last year, our average sales qualified opportunity was coming in at $3,800. And now you're going to want me to come in here and get you 4 times as many for 66% less. That doesn't seem like it's going to work. And so there's a combination, like the financial numbers always help root people in the ground because it's really objective. And that's where I like it to be. Otherwise, like the other places where I'd go is like your SQO is $3,800, like at your ACV, it should be this benchmark, but then it's more like opinions. Like when you look at it at the cost efficiencies and the budget allocated and the projections using historical conversion rates, it becomes much more black and white. And so that's the way that I like to do it. Does it work every time? Definitely not. But that's the way that I do it. And we'd be happy to answer a follow-up there because we could go in several directions.
I think that's helpful, especially in terms of making it sure it's realistic and rooted in, like, again, to your point, cost efficiencies, and that you're going to get the right number of dollars back from the dollars you put in. And that's not, but the other side of it is alignment. How do you align then or get in front of that with sales in terms of the share? Do you just stack hands on what portion of the pipeline and revenue marketing is accountable for, or is there another approach to that you'd recommend?
So this one is typically a projection off of last year's performance, that gets changed based on budget allocation changes and then just general dynamics in the business. So like pretty mature business, marketing is doing 39% of revenue, which means that they're probably doing like 33% of pipeline because they're going to have higher close rates than sales. And then next year, without any type of like budget changes or anything, I'd expect marketing to do a little bit more than they did last year from a net new contribution because the world's moving that way. And then if you added additional budget and things like that, you might see marketing move from 39% to 49%, which I think is a reasonable jump over a 12-month period of time if the budget supports it and the historical performance does as well. But that's really the only, if you're coming out with no historical data, it's purely based on the go-to-market model and how the budget's allocated. If you have historical data, then it's modified off of the historical performance. Cool.
Got a couple more questions that were submitted in advance, maybe before we wrap up. This was an interesting one. So this is Simon. I'm curious what your thoughts are on community-based marketing and its effectiveness in 2021. For example, a community forum for a software product for people to discuss, help, support each other, while hopefully creating a sense of community through valuable and engaging content.
Kind of sounds like a customer success community. Am I reading that right?
I guess it's kind of, it looks like a community for users of a particular product. So it might be maybe more in the customer marketing or customer success world, but I think it's effectively leveraging that for, I guess, retention and new customer acquisition. And what you think on that broadly?
I think it's a great idea. I think that you could also, I can't see the participant list, but my guess is that several of our customers are on this Zoom right now, right? And so I feel like the actual solution here that companies, for whatever reason, just choose not to do is if you create a space where people professionally get better that is around your ICP, then it doesn't matter whether they're a customer or not. You just create a space where they're good. People that use the product can get things about the product. People that don't use the product can learn or just get better at their craft. I continue to push back on companies because they treat people that don't use their product differently than their customers. And even if you look at the people that don't use their product, they think that they're like, the people way up here only need top of funnel content, and the people that have an open pipeline only need case studies. And it just doesn't make sense. It's like all of these people are professionals. Give them stuff that helps them be better all the time, where they actually want to be a part of it. And so do I think it could help? Yes, I think that it could even perform better relative to all business goals if you made it available to everyone and made it just valuable to that profession.
Yeah, I agree. I also feel like people underestimate the revenue impact of retaining and expanding your current customer base. Of course, you always need to acquire net new, but there's a ton of opportunity in revenue growth with your current customer base.
And then when you consider that, I would say at least 50% of your net new revenue is actually being generated at some level through word of mouth as well.
Yep.
So a lot of that's coming from customers. So yes, I believe that people undervalue that as well.
Got another really good question from a podcast listener. He loved the recent Back to Basics episode with Triana, the Refine Labs creative director, on just the creative process. And so he had a follow-up question for you on this. So loves the concept, loved the episode, sees the value in testing different versions of creative and copy to find the winners. It's a strategy that he uses himself. The metric that he has been using to pick the winner is click-through rate. He has heard you talk a lot about the value of impressions, and the click-through isn't always as important. And so he was curious to hear your perspective on, when you're testing creative, what are the metrics that you look at in order to choose the winners? He says, I could see conversion rate to pick a winner, but that might be a much longer, more expensive test. So hopefully that gives you enough to riff on.
Yeah, if you're just using images, then click-through rate becomes one, if you don't change the audience dynamics, becomes a static number that you can use to quantify, that you can standardize against to make decisions on if you have 0.1 versus 0.8, to assume that one creative performed better because the engagement is much higher. On most ad platforms, you're not going to get a lot of comments, a lot of likes, a lot of the other signals that you might get in order to continue to inform that, at least not in a way that I think is good to make strategy decisions off of. So click-through rate becomes the default there. If you were going to move to video, then view rate or other things could be a good comparison from video to video. And the ultimate, it's a lagging metric, but the ultimate is view through or click through attributable conversions. You'll get that on LinkedIn because of iOS 14. You won't get that on Facebook or Instagram anymore. So that used to be the end metric for me. The click-through rates were helpful. It helped me optimize initially, things like that. But at the end of the campaign, I could go back and look and say, Creative A generated 9 demos, Creative B generated 0 demos, Creative C generated 1 demo, Creative A 1. What can we learn from that? Let's figure out how to get some elements from Creative A into the next round for next month. So those are a couple options, but I think click-through rate is the short-term default, just for lack of a better in-platform engagement metric right now. Like the ideal the ideal metric is consumption, right? Like, but that's hard to get. So did the impression actually get consumed? The thing I don't agree with on the click, but I need to default to it, is that like a lot of people don't click. Not more than 99% of people aren't going to click on it, most likely, for like as a benchmark. And so for the 99% of people that didn't click on it, did they read the 7 words that are on there? Did they actually consume it? Did it make an impact? Did it change their perception? Did it lead them closer to understanding something about your product? Those are the things that you don't get. Those are the things that make it scary for marketers to run demand the way that we do, and creates a big white space for us because no marketers are going to do it because they're too scared, because they attach to the metrics that they feel comfortable with.
Our good friend John has a question. I'm so happy you came tonight, John. You've been making me laugh in the chat.
Yeah, me too.
I saw I saw a video of you on LinkedIn today. You were looking good too, but I loved your question. I'll let you get to it.
Well, I've been threatening for months and months, and it takes me forever. Chris pours these out like it's, yesterday's news, and I admire it, and I'm envious at the same time.
Are you moving?
What's that?
Are you moving? What do you got going on back there?
You lost me.
So I was just commenting. It looks a little messy in your office.
Oh, it's this is cleaned up. You should have seen it a week ago. Anyway,
sorry, let's get into it. Yeah.
I'm curious as to your thoughts when you've certainly mastered LinkedIn and most of social media, but you, unless you've changed recently, are mostly promoting DGL through LinkedIn, and I think you do a masterful job of taking this weekly AMA podcast, slicing it up, and posting that with very thoughtful and sometimes controversial pieces to encourage engagement.
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn's changing things. A lot of things are changing at the same time. What are you finding now? If you use Demand Gen Live kind of as your case study, how many times a week are you posting? How many times a day? What changes have you seen in the algorithm, and kind of where do you see things going, and what's worked for you?
On LinkedIn specifically?
LinkedIn
or just kind of the whole mix?
If you're leveraging others, I'd certainly be interested in your thoughts there.
Yeah, so you're pretty familiar with the strategy, which is event, which creates long form podcasts, which gets chopped up into short form micro content that goes on LinkedIn, could go on YouTube, could go in other places. We're on LinkedIn mainly. The driver, or some of the things that I'm seeing right now, and this is probably top of mind because I was just on vacation, is that I've been posting a little bit less frequently over the past 2 weeks. Haven't seen a drop in engagement, but haven't seen the posts that I post get more engagement just because I post less time. So the post frequency doesn't seem to have an impact on overall engagement, at least in the time that I've been looking at it qualitatively. Some of the other dynamics that I see happening are comments are real. I had a comment that got 700 likes last week. And so comments are real. I've been getting back to, and I appreciate all the people that engage with the comments because it gives me good feedback, is that I've been going back to some of the roots of what I used to do, which is try and comment on somewhere between 3 and 10 posts a day. There's several of them that will get hundreds of likes on those comments, and then they become a post. The post that I wrote today was a comment from last week. And so I think that it's basically like the audience tells you it's going to work before you ever post it because you've already shown them and they've already liked it. So I think the comment opportunity is really high for people. Most of the several comments that I've had have gotten more engagement than my average post, which is wild. You also pick up a ton of different followers because you're the top comment on a post that had enough engagement to get 700 likes on a comment. So you pick up a ton of followers that way, which is really interesting. Yeah, those are a couple of the things that I'm seeing. Honestly, the platform has been pretty static in my view, outside of like them hacking the algorithm to promote and train people to use new features like polls.
So does LinkedIn punish you? Let's say I want to catch 7 to 8. I want to put a post out 7:30. to catch the East Coast folks in Eastern Daylight Time, similar post to catch Central, and a similar post to catch Pacific. Do I get punished in the algorithm if I do that?
For sure. You definitely will. You got to pick one time. If you post on top of a post, it'll deprioritize the previous post. So that's a known effect of the LinkedIn algorithm dating back to at least 2019.
Other stupid moves I should avoid? Besides cleaning my office?
I think not posting too frequently is an obvious one, making sure those are spread out.
Twice a week kind of thing?
I no more than twice a day.
Oh, that's a lot. Okay.
Yeah, but I think that like you could go twice a day and spread out in the right period of time, and that would be the max that I would recommend. Everything else I think is just like kind of be a good human, and don't get caught up in the vanity metrics of the platform, because it's easy to do that.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Good to see you, John. Thanks for the great question. All right, we've wrapped up the AMA. I think we should close out tonight.
Cool.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Yes. We talked a little bit today, and I'm just trying to like drive it home, of the idea of making changes to your marketing because you see a huge opportunity, not because something went wrong and you have to change something. And for whatever reason, companies are very reactive in marketing land. They only want to change something, like an easy example is the companies that spend $3 million a year on a trade show booth. I know we're in COVID right now, but generally just stick with me for this example. They're not going to stop spending on the trade show booths until there's something so wrong in their marketing that they won't be able to fix it. That's the problem. It's the problem that a lot of companies ran into when COVID happened. They were over-invested in physical events and outbound sales. They hadn't figured out at all how to create content, do digital marketing, or anything else besides shitty lead gen that didn't close. All of those activities got hit. The poor performance on all of those activities digitally got hidden because they were doing well enough with all of the money spent on events and outbound that when those things went away, they got crushed. And if they had just looked at it and been like, hey, we're spending way too much in trade shows, we need to figure out how to market digitally because it's fucking 2019 and people buy things over the internet. So there are opportunities out there. I could list off a lot of them. I'll do a couple just so you get a sense. All the things that B2B companies aren't doing right now: creating a community, hosting a live event once a week that people love, doing a podcast, leveraging influential people to get involved in their marketing, whether that's through creating content, doing events together, co-marketing, paid posts. The options are endless. Posting on organic social every day, experimenting with TikTok, trying YouTube Shorts, figuring out how the Instagram algorithm works differently on Reels versus Stories. There's a lot of opportunities out there for people. B2B companies do none of them because all they do is listen to tech vendors and the analyst firms that get paid by those tech vendors to just do whatever the MarTech vendors say. And so hopefully there's a couple people out there that take a couple of these ideas and hopefully go and implement them, because there's a lot of success out there, and I wish you the best in implementing them.
It was good to be back this week. Good to see everyone.
Yeah.
Love all the questions. Great AMA tonight. Save them up for next week.
Great to see some new faces. Brian, great to see you. Chris, I think this was not your first time, but good to see you again. John, sorry for giving you a hard time on The Office. And hope to see you all again next week. I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Have a great week. See you next Tuesday.
Bye. Hey everyone, this is Chris Walker, the CEO of Refine Labs. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe to the channel for more videos in the future. We're also live for Demand Gen Live at 7:30 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday night, which will also go on the State of Demand Gen podcast, which is available on Apple and Spotify. Thanks again and see you next time.